God is my shepherd. I don't need a thing. As in, I lack for nothing, or I'm satisfied. Those are some pretty heady statements, and to a person who always seems to be in need of something, it sounds absolutely heavenly. The translation that I read to you here on the steps with the kids of this 23rd Psalm is from The Message by Eugene Peterson. For most of my life, I've always heard the more traditional version, "The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want." I like both versions in different ways and at different times. Regardless of who's doing the translating, though, in times of deepest sorrow, Psalm 23 is the number one go-to scripture. And even non-Christians have no trouble recognizing the first couple of lines of this very powerful poem. It speaks to and for God's people in troubled times, and it infuses our Christian art and our liturgy, our music, our stories, and most importantly, our imaginations. Why does this particular psalm speak to us? And why do its words go down into the deepest places of our hearts? What is it about this short poem that resonates within us at our greatest time of need? It's really very profound, the power of this poem. During my time in seminary, I was fortunate enough to be able to take a psalm class under the direction of Dr. Clint McCann, a well-known and widely respected Old Testament professor and interpreter. So I am a little bit of a psalm geek because Clint McCann is a teacher who makes his students fall in love with whatever topic it is that he happens to be speaking on. Now in seminary they say context is everything, and so some things that you need to know about Psalm 23 are that in biblical times sheep were dominant herd animals in the ancient Near East, and the role of the shepherd was to provide for the flock and to protect it from harm. The sheep were the sole responsibility of the shepherd. It was the shepherd and the shepherd alone who was accountable for the welfare of the sheep and the safety. The responsibility was so great that the title shepherd came to have specific connections with royalty, and the rod and the staff were signs of the office. The imagery of God as shepherd was intended to communicate that humans have everything they need because God provides. Psalm 23 expresses a longing to live as sheep with a shepherd God who knows where all the green pastures are and who will surely lead the sheep to the best spots. It expresses a yearning to just relax and stop struggling, secure in the knowledge that God will provide, even when things look really, really bleak. But you know, it's difficult to rest secure. Everything in our world tells us that the only way to have anything is to work really, really hard and to struggle. Life is hard. People are hard, and it's not always readily apparent that the so-called shepherd is leading us to green pastures or any pastures at all for that matter. Beginning with the wilderness journey between Egypt and the promised land, humans have struggled with learning how to gather up only enough manna for one day. Everything inside us screams, grab all you can because you don't know what tomorrow is going to look like. Oftentimes, we find ourselves wandering off in pursuit of greener pastures that appear to have more to offer, but usually land us in trouble, begging for God's mercy. There are a lot of psalms, in fact, that describe the disruptive and churning experience of being scared, lost, found, judged and forgiven, sent away and brought back. It's all part of this human experience, and what better way to portray it than the high drama of a God who pursues lost sheep? In today's world, we usually turn to Psalm 23 in times of sorrow. But as inspiration goes, it's a whole lot harder to make that shepherd connection work in this day and age. For starters, we no longer rely on kings to provide for the welfare of the kingdom. We rely on the government. Fences have replaced sheep herders. But more than anything else, we live in a world where individualism is king, where we are the kings, providing for our own personal little kingdoms. Sheep flock together. They aren't particularly smart. They're stubborn and willful. They scare easily. They don't do what they're told to do. They don't lead, they follow. And if they don't follow, then a dog nearby will keep them in line. Who in their right mind wants to take on the identity of a sheep? It's one thing to call God my shepherd, but there's no way that I want to be thought of as just another sheep. And while I like the idea of God providing everything I need, there was absolutely nothing in my training that taught me that it's okay to sit around waiting for it. My pride makes it difficult for me to sit around waiting for God to provide. Besides, if I can make it to those green pastures on my own, why trouble God? Surely God has plenty of other sheep to worry about already. Does your brain work like that? I know mine sometimes drives me crazy with nonsense like that. The pastures that we lead ourselves to are never quite green enough. And someone else's pastures always look bigger and better and greener. So we work harder, we go into debt deeper, and every day we live in terror that we're never going to measure up because we live in a world where no matter how green your pasture is, someone else's pasture is always going to be greener. The marketplace thrives on our desire for greener pastures. We're trained from day one to want greener pastures. Think about it. We're literally being consumed by our wanting. We want love and prosperity, good health, long life, and while we're at it, we also want to have the most and the best stuff. But this psalm serves to remind us that our lives are not about what we want, but about already having God. A wise man once said, there are two ways to be rich. One is to have lots, the other is to want little. Our relationship with God and the love and guidance of our shepherd provides us with what we really need and then helps us to be satisfied with the rest. For most of us here today, including myself, it's hard to believe that we are lost or in need of any kind of protection. None of us here have fallen through society's cracks into homelessness and poverty. We're not in jail. We're not strung out on drugs. We're not mentally unbalanced. Why on earth would we need a shepherd? Now, of course, we do live in a violent world with threats to our safety being a normal part of everyday life. School shootings, bombings, war, evil, danger, and natural disasters. But we don't turn to a shepherd. We tighten up our security. We tighten up our immigration laws and beef up law enforcement by giving them combat gear and war zone tactics. We give unrestricted access to firearms to everyone, including criminals and the mentally unbalanced. And if innocent bystanders suffer for it, we lament and we mourn, but then we just move on. Why on earth do we need a shepherd? And even when the threat does hit too close to home, there's always the comfort of food or booze or shopping or Netflix streaming to numb and to protect us. We are sheep in wolves' clothing, trying to be cool, trying to sneak away from the rest of the herd so that we can appear to be in charge and independent. Who are we trying to impress, though? Other sheep? Do we think that wandering off from the herd makes us cool? Actually, it makes us dinner. Smart sheep stay close to the shepherd. How much joy do we miss? How much time do we waste trying to prove to ourselves and to each other that we're not really sheep, that we don't need help? It seems like something dreadful always has to happen before we finally come to understand that we are not in charge, that circumstances are not always subject to our control, and if we want to truly thrive, then we need to nestle into the arms of the shepherd. Deep down deep, we know that we are lost in this big, mysterious universe without that shepherd to navigate us. It's not a matter of shame, it's a matter of perspective. The psalmist and Jesus often described humans as lost sheep, but it wasn't to shame or to judge us, it was to help us understand that our salvation lies in our weakness. For some strange reason, God's strength comes into its own in our weakness. Psalm 23 was written long before Jesus, but Christians have come to identify him as the greatest shepherd that there ever was or ever will be. Others are called shepherds, pastors, advisors, and counselors, and rulers even, but they're only shepherds in how they resemble Jesus. So what would be the main characteristics of this good shepherd? Well, for one thing, care. God cares. God doesn't have to care. God could have given up on us a long time ago, but God has never, ever stopped caring about us. Not once in human history has God ever abandoned us. God cares so much, in fact, that God even took on our flesh, grew in it, faced temptation in it, and died in the most extraordinary act of love in human history. Not just for the sheep who have always stuck around, but for each and every one who ever wandered off. And then the ones that do wander off, they're not beaten or scolded when they return. No, God lays that wanderer across God's shoulders and brings them home. And then God throws them a party. And then there's trust. Whether we're talking about ancient trust or contemporary trust, a good shepherd is completely trustworthy. The promise to the ancient psalmist was simple. I'm with you, and I'm going to take care of you. In response, the psalmist confesses, I fear no evil, for you are with me. I may be surrounded by enemies, but you prepare a table for me in the presence of my enemies. I mean, what a holy and sacred trust between the psalmist and his God. This psalm is not just for funerals or sadness or for desperate measures. It's a way of life. It's an affirmation of the loving care of a God who wants to lead us in our lives and who wants to bless us in our lives. As Clint McCann pointed out in one of his commentaries, at every turn, Psalm 23 promises us God's providence and provision of everything that we need in this life. So how do we learn to let go of all of those needs that we think that we have and instead claim and share in the abundance of God's blessing? Well, here is a challenge for you for this week. It won't take long, so I hope that you will all try it. At some point during this coming week, I invite you to write down on one side of a sheet of paper 10 things for which you are most grateful for in your life. In the other column, write down the 10 things that you want most right now. Once this is done, consider this question. Which would have a greater impact? Losing all of the things for which you are grateful, or gaining all of the things that you currently want? Today, right now, we are invited to rise above a culture culture shaped by its incessant wanting, and be transformed instead into a community that is marked by trust in God's blessing? Will we accept the invitation? Amen.